Welcome to another edition of Toca Backstage. This is Chris Wolf, the Executive Director of the Torrance Cultural Arts Foundation. It is my extreme honor and privilege to have Gordie Marshall from the show Go Now, which will be at the Armstrong Theater on April 11th at 8 o'clock. And Go Now is the music of the Moody Blues. Gordie, thank you so much for taking the time. I certainly do appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Nice. It's good to be here.
And if I understand correctly, you are currently in the UK, right?
That's right. I am speaking to you from I call it my studio. It's the back bedroom of my house in Wimbledon. So as you can probably see out into the garden. So this is where I come and hide myself away during the day and work.
Perfect. So if I understand correctly, you were part of the Moody Blues for like 25 years?
That's right. Yes, I joined them in 1990. And then I left in 2015, and then I started my own band, which to begin with wasn't a Moody Blues tribute. It was just a group of session musicians that we all got together, and we called ourselves the Rewind Project. And we played songs from all of the artists that we'd worked with. So we had somebody from the Hollies. We obviously have Mick Wilson from 10cc. A lot of us have worked with Sir Cliff Richard. So we did some Moody Blues, we did some 10cc, we did some Cliff Richard, we did some Hollies. Because I'd worked with Jeff Wayne's The War of the Worlds, we did a couple of songs from that album as well. That's how it started off. But that band in its incarnation still does occasional gigs, but the music of the Moody Blues, which I love with a passion because I've been playing the music for so long, that seemed to hit a chord with so many people. So we morphed the band into a straight Moody Blues tribute show, and that's the beast for me that goes down the best of everything. We've got a number of shows. We've also got an Eagles show and a Carpenters show, but the Moody Blues show is the one where my heart is, and I love playing it.
Awesome. And I could imagine that 25 years on the road with Moody Blues would be a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But
it's a book.
There you go. What do you think is so magnetic about the music? I mean, it truly is iconic. And what do you think resonates with people so much about it?
I mean, that's the $64,000 question. The music of the Moody Blues, I believe, transcends sort of style and fashion. They weren't trying to be a pop group as such. All of the men in the Moodies, John Lodge, Justin Hayward, Graham Edge, Ray Thomas. I'd never played in the band with Mike Pinder, but Mike was a deep intellect. They were all heavy readers. They read a lot of philosophy. They were looking for enlightenment, I think, in themselves, and I think that came across in their music. And there's a depth to the music that I think is rare for classic rock bands. Graham, who was the original drummer, has written some amazing poetry, which was obviously put to music. They all had eclectic musical tastes, which they brought to the table when they composed. So one of them would write a song, and then the others would join in and then add their bits. And I think that's one of the reasons why the sum is greater than the parts. And they've spanned so many different musical genres. So you've got songs such as I'm Just a Singer in a Rock and Roll Band, which is an out and out rock song. You've got I Know You're Out There Somewhere, which is a classic. Basically, it's a pop rock song. And then you've got Nights in White Satin, which is the all-time classic love ballad. And the chorus consists of I Love You. That's it. And then you've got songs such as House of Four Doors, and you've got Timothy Leary, about the famous lecturer in America that advocated LSD. That it's such a depth of investment intellectually and emotionally that the results of their music for me is just that like nothing I've ever heard before or heard from any other group of artists together. Sounds a bit deep, but I really do mean
no, that's perfect. That's perfect. And so the group started, I think, in 1965.
Yep.
And they're not still going, right? Or am I?
No, well, the Moody Blues, the original Moody Blues, the lead singer was Denny Lane before Justin Hayward and John Lodge joined. And Go Now was the song that was the Moody Blues' first #1 hit in 1965. and written by Bessie Banks. And that was a song that was on the album called The Magnificent Moodies. Then Denny Laine left the Moody Blues and joined Paul McCartney, and they created Wings. So the Moody Blues were looking for a new singer, and Justin Hayward came along, and John Lodge did along at the same time. And then they got together as the sort of second incarnation of the Moody Blues. And that's when they recorded the album Days of Future Past, which I think was in 1960. I think they recorded it in 66 and it was released in 67, I think. And that album was originally a demonstration album for the label Decca, because they wanted to demonstrate this brand new technology they had at the time called stereo. And they were going to put an orchestra on one side and a pop group on the other. And when they got into the studio, they sort of mashed the two together, and it was the very first orchestral rock, effectively. And obviously, Days of Future Past had Tuesday Afternoon, Nights in White Satin. It had poetry on it. It was a brilliant album, and obviously brought them to the international stage.
Well, and it's so funny because even now, when you just mentioned Nights in White Satin, the song goes in my head. It's like I don't think you can get rid of it.
No, you can't. It's a beautiful song.
And it's so amazing too. I find that, tribute bands are great, but it's always great to have somebody who has been with the band to be a part of that group. And I find that the audiences for tribute bands range from baby boomers to children, because nowadays it's so easy to find the music. It's like before we were all sort of adhered to a radio station where we just heard what the radio station played. But now with the internet, people find everything. Do you think that helps to keep sort of that music alive, that kids are finding it now?
Yes, I really do. I mean, in the industry, they call that the long tail. So it used to be that you would go along to a record shop and you could only buy what was physically in the store. And now, of course, with digital downloads and iPhones and what have you, you can have any piece of music that's ever been recorded. So that just opens up the entire world's musical catalogue, which has to be a good thing. Access to sort of limitless music is wonderful. I've seen online recently, which is I think it's on YouTube. It's something like song reactions, and you get people. There's a couple of black guys that are into hip hop, and what they do is they sit in their studio. Someone will suggest a song to them, or put their headphones on, and they'll listen to some old song. And these guys that are used to sort of rapping and in the hood and all that sort of stuff, not from our genre. And I watched one, and this guy had like 3 million views, and he put on Nights in White Satin. And he listened to it for a while. And in the end, he's got tears coming down his eyes. This is a sort of a black guy from New York in his 20s, who's the very first time he heard the song. And they did it right through to the end with the orchestral outro and then Graham's poem at the end. And he's going, man, this is fantastic. That's when I think you realize that a song like that isn't just a pop song of its time. It's a classic evergreen song, and it'll be classic. It'll be the classical music of the future.
Yeah. Agreed. Do you think that, well, as a musician playing this music you were with them for 25 years. I don't know how long it's been since you've actually been part of the group, but do you have a favorite song that you like to play?
I'm going to say no, actually. I have favorites. We do a song called The Other Side of Life, which is like a 12/8 blues shuffle. And I just love playing that just because of the physicality. There's just something groovy about playing there's just something nice about that. So I enjoy that for that reason. I love playing Timothy Leary because of the musical corners in it. There's a lot of stops and starts and accelerendos, and you have to listen very carefully to see where everybody's going because it's not metronomic. I love playing Singing in a Rock and Roll Band because it's just a straight ahead rock song. But then, of course, we get to Nights in White Satin, and you can see people in the audience registering with that song, and then you realize, what it means to a lot of people, and you've got to take a song like that very seriously. Yeah. So I have favorites, but I think, to be perfectly honest, just the band's my favorite band.
And how did you? Well, going back to the start, how did you? I mean, were you just invited to be a part of the Moody Blues? Did you audition? How did that relationship start?
Yeah, actually, Graham had an injury in 1990. I think he fell over and headbutted his mahogany floor after a couple of bottles of wine, something like that. And he did actually seriously hurt his back. So they wanted another drummer to come in and just help out for one 9-week tour. And they held a series of what can only be described as cattle call auditions at that time. And I went, it's from Monday to Friday. And I went in on the Wednesday morning and they picked me on that day. I think they got bored of listening to drummers by Wednesday. But originally I was just booked for 9 weeks. And Graham and I got on like a house on fire. And it worked really well having 2 drummers on stage. So they asked me back for the next tour and then the following year. So there was it wasn't like a 25-year contract. It was just a series of short, can you come along and do this tour? And yes. And then I just did every tour for 25 years going on.
That's amazing. And so your band that you have now, did you go through the same process putting this together, or did you just know all these people?
No, these are guys that I've known for a long time. Mick Wilson, who sang for 20 years with 10cc, the Moody Blues and 10cc did a double headlining show at the Coca-Cola Dome in Johannesburg in South Africa about 7 or 8 years ago. And we'd realized that we'd worked together 30 years previously, and it was great to hook up. And I saw him sing with 10cc, and he's just astonishing singer. Great on stage, really relaxed. And we got chatting at breakfast the next day. And this is where the idea of the band came along. And he said, so what are you doing at the end of the tour? I said, well, nothing until the next tour, and that's 4 months away. He said, same here. I said, we should put a band together. He said, you put a band together and I'll come and sing in it. So that's pretty much what we did. Then we've got a guy called Patrick Duffin, who I've known for a while. We call him our secret weapon. He plays bass with us in America. In the UK, often plays keyboards, but guitar is his first instrument. And he's a fantastic singer. And then Nick Kendall, Mick Wilson brought Nick Kendall, the guitarist, along. And then we've got another guitarist called Tim Maple, who is the musical director for X Factor over here in the UK. And then we've got a bass player called Malcolm Moore, who works in Mamma Mia in the West End. So these are all musicians I've known for decades, and I know that they're all great singers. That's the most important thing, because the Moody's have got it's not like a pop group with one singer. Everybody in the band sings, so you've got to have 3 or 4 strong singers. So they're all great instrumentalists, and they're all great characters as well. So they were all hand-picked, and we sort of got together and had what you would call a chemistry test, and played a few songs. And it was just, as soon as we played, I thought, no, this is it. This is perfect.
That's great. So I imagine it's got to be difficult taking on like the Moody Blues. Do you ever get people like upset with you after the show that you didn't play a certain number, or they just want more?
Yeah, our biggest, the Moody Blues they're 9 big albums. When I went through the list to see what we were going to play, I was just scrolling down. I thought, no, surely I'm going to get to the bottom of this. They've written hundreds and hundreds of songs. So our biggest decision is what to leave out. That's my dog, by the way. And so the band's downstairs rehearsing one new number called "How Much Is That Dog in the Window?" And that's the intro. That's actually my wife coming home from work, but she'll stop in a minute, I'm sure. You can't edit live, can you?
No, and that's the beauty of it. It's like theater, that's like when I'm backstage with people during shows, I'm like super calm, and people go, "How can you be so calm?" I'm like, it's going to happen no matter what. So just enjoy the ride.
Well, yeah, enjoy the barking.
Exactly. There you go. Well, that's okay. So, at least my cats aren't coming up here.
So what was the question again? I've come back.
Do people ever...
oh, that's right, yes. We do get a lot of requests because people have their favorites. that people don't get upset with us. I mean, thankfully, the show goes down so well. We always get a standing ovation. It's lovely to play this music and then see people respond to it because they know the music. So mostly we get love back and lots of applause, which is what more can you want? You know,
Right.
it beats working for a living anyway. I shouldn't really say that. But no, people don't get upset about songs we don't play, but we are trying to mix and match. So every year, this is our 4th year of touring now. We try and introduce new songs all the time. So our catalogue and our repertoire rather is growing slowly. We're adding 2 or 3 songs a year.
Nice.
If you were to play them all back to back, you could do a 7-hour concert.
Well, that was like we just did another tribute show, Piano Men, which is the music of Billy Joel and Elton John. And I just kept saying, how do you, I mean, their catalogs to combine would make a 2-day concert. How do you pick and choose? So I imagine it's got to be part personal aesthetic and part what is the audience going to want.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that show. They came over to the UK. That's Terry Davis and his son, Nick, isn't it?
Yeah.
And wow, that's a great show.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just seem to sort of, I think really, if you do a show long enough, the set list becomes a work of art and you get to realize which songs fit with each other. So it's like an album used to be. You'd put songs together on an album. You could spend weeks and weeks working out the set list for an album. So each song complements each other. You can't have 2 songs in the same key next to each other. You can't have 2 songs in the same tempo next to each other. So you have to give all of those thoughts into the thought process. You have to think about it quite deeply. But yeah, the set list itself is a big challenge. What to leave out? Yeah,
I'm glad I didn't have to make those decisions.
Well, if you've got any requests, Chris, put them on a piece of paper and let me know. We'll see if we can we'll slot them in for you.
That's okay. So one of the things besides presenting wonderful shows like yours, the foundation does is we try to help mentor and encourage young up and coming artists, performers. And I always like to ask people who I talk to, do you have any suggestions or words of encouragement that you impart to young performers who are trying to find their way?
Yes, I do. It's an open question, and of course, you could do an entire TED talk on that, couldn't you? I think really, first of all, find something that speaks to you. Find a genre of music that speaks to you, whether it's jazz or classical. It's irrelevant to what it is. It has to be something that you can identify with and something that you love doing. And then the most important thing is, sounds very simple, is practice. All of the musicians that I know that are virtuosos have spent years literally practicing 6, 8, sometimes 10 hours a day for years and years. I know it sounds excessive, but that's what's required in order to get the sort of chops that are needed to be able to do it in a way that people respond well. So in terms of putting a band together or getting work, I really don't know, because the industry has changed so dramatically since I entered it 40 years ago that there is no route in. It's not like if you wanted to if you wanted to do medicine or law, there's a route that you can take, an academic route. With music, and the arts, it's entirely down to the individual and how they want to express themselves. So I think my advice would be is find something that you love, practice it with passion, and perform it wherever and whenever you can, and try and get as good as you possibly can, and then market yourself wherever you possibly can, and opportunities will open up for you, whether it's people that you meet through the music that you play and then you join up with somebody and you create something between you, or whether you become a solo artist and you've just got one particular thing that you want to do. I think passion is probably the biggest prerequisite for being a musician.
And I think that is probably hands down the number one answer I typically get is find something that you're passionate about, follow that passion, because at the end of the day, that's what you're going to have to live with. And It's so interesting that I was just thinking, because you're a drummer, there was a group that performed in one of our talent competitions called the Lemon Drops. And I don't think they're still around, but they were like 3 girls, and there was a drummer, And I remember one of the comments the judges made was that she was like very charismatic. And I wonder, do you think that there's something innate that comes across when you're performing?
What do you mean? For me?
For anybody. I mean, do you think that that's part of the magic of?
Yeah, I mean, normally what I tend to find, and this is a retrospective observation really, and that is that when you get to know musicians well, and the way they play and the way they perform makes sense once you understand their personalities, because there's a link, I believe, between personalities and the way that you perform your music. I mean, Justin Hayward was famously called the reluctant rock star. Because he wasn't, didn't throw his arms around. He just stood there and played and sang, didn't move a lot. But that had a charisma all itself. And when you listen to the music, his attention to details, that's one of the things that is really significant about him as a musician and a man. His attention to detail with the music is off the scale. And then so his personality comes across in his music. John Lodge is more flamboyant, and again, that you can marry the two. When you watch him perform, you can see his personality in it. And Graham Edge, the drummer, of course, was just a hooligan, and I say that in the nicest possible way, gentleman hooligan. So he was a fearless writer and a fearless performer, and he would just throw himself into it. And yeah, so I think that the personalities, when they come together, they create something that I said when we first started talking, means the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
And for me, I sort of label it as authenticity. It's like when you're being authentic to yourself, it comes across and people buy into it. Whereas if you're trying to fit a mold that you think is going to be popular or make you money, but it's not who you are, then it's not going to sell that well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sort of does make sense. I mean, I don't want to, I'm not degrading any of the tribute bands, but there are guys, you like ABBA groups and Beatles groups, and they get dressed up and they wear the platforms and the wigs and everything. And that's fine, because people go along and they suspend reality and they enjoy it for what it is. That's absolutely fantastic. And there are some great bands around like that. But we don't do that. So We're not dressing up like the Moodies. We are, I mean, if I could be so bold, I'd sort of equate us to an orchestra playing Beethoven, but in a modern context. So we are schooled musicians that have taken a serious body of work, and we are performing it live to the best of our ability, having the most fun we possibly can as we do it. And that's what we do. And that seems to hit a note with an audience. They seem to get that. They know that they're seeing musicians, if I may say so, at the top of their game, performing brilliant music. And when you're in the room where music is being performed live, that is a relationship between the people in the audience and the people on stage that you don't get when you listen to it on your headphones or you put a record on. It's great listening to records and the radio, but when you're in the same physical space as the music being played live, that creates its own energy. And when you've got musicians, like you say, that are into it and are passionate and are authentic, for me, that's the ultimate live experience.
Right. And I meant, my comment wasn't really about tribute bands, but just musicians in general. But going back to your point, I think the same could be true with tribute bands, like you said. People who are coming from an authentic place and a passionate place can carry it, like your show. We have one coming up called Yesterday and Today, which is a Beatles show, which is coming from a place of pure love for the Beatles, but it's not a dress-up wigs thing. It's actually an interactive thing where people come in, they write down their favorite Beatles song, and they make up the set list right before the show.
That's
it's kind
cool.
of a fun concept, but that's coming from a pure place of pure love for that music. So I think that, like you said, it can be from the creator of music or somebody who just wants to be a musician and does a tribute band. I think the passion has got to be there for you to be successful.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Well, last question. What do you want people to walk away from after the performance of Go Now? What's the feeling that you want them to walk away with?
I know it probably sounds a bit corny, but I will say love, because the mood, everything that the Moody Blues try to say can be summed up in the chorus of Nights in White Satin, which is "I love you." And when you think about what's happening in the world at the moment, and the way things seem to be going, one of the only sort of emotional respites I find I can get is when I listen to beautiful music performed really well. And it enriches me and it makes me feel better. I feel augmented as a person when I listen to great music. And I would hope, and I would really hope, that we can bring something like that to the people that come and see us, that they go out of the auditorium of the venue thinking that was fantastic, and they feel better, and they're slightly lighter in step, and just feeling good, because that's what we're bringing to the table. Is a good feeling.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to it, and I think we're going to need it.
That's a topic for another podcast, isn't it?
I don't go there.
No,
whatever side you're on, I don't go there. Well, thank you so much. We're looking forward to the show. And again, that's Go Now, the music of the Moody Blues, April 11th at the Armstrong Theater at 8 o'clock. Gordie, thank you so much for taking the time.
Chris, thank you so much. It's been a delight to talk to you. It really has.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. I'll see you then.
All right.